So, hello, welcome back to another episode of Self-Development with Tactics podcast. And you may and or may not know the site in the background. For whatever reason, it is a tiny bit fucked up. Let me reload it once again. And it is still fucked up. I don't know if this is supposed to be like this. I really doubt it, because this does not look right. But we are on Peter Attia's site, which is, or who is, a medical doctor. Very recently on the Andrew Huberman Lab podcast. Also, Tim Ferriss is or has been featuring him in his books, but also on a podcast, and so on and so forth. I would argue that he is relatively known at this point of view. And I found very interesting, there is his nutritional framework, I guess, when it comes to fasting, but I think and or actually hope in general. So it's very interesting. It really is. And it was still, I might be able to show you. Yeah, the whole site is kind of fucked up. It is still there, my nutritional framework, on the very front page of this broken site. I hope that this is going to be fixed rather soon or something. So my nutritional framework from January 12th, which is actually my birthday, this is funny, 2020, by Peter Attia, who is a physician, went to Stanford Medical School, and so on and so forth. Nutrition is such a loaded topic, almost a religious or a political one. So I'm always looking for ways to explain it that are as free from the baggage as possible. I recently read a paper in the New England Journal of Medicine, which is the NEJM, Effects of Intermittent Fasting on Health, Aging and Disease. This review is one of the latest, making the case that when you eat and don't eat can have a profound impact on your health. But before looking into the study, I'll do that next week. We need a framework to put it into context. Nutrition is such a loaded topic, almost a religious political one. So I'm always looking for ways to explain it that are as free from the baggage as possible. So far, and this constantly is evolving, to look for this to get better over time. The framework I use to explain eating is based on modifying 3 parameters or pulling 3 levers in various combinations. A month ago, I posted a short video explaining this way to think about nutrition. It comes down to 3 forms of restriction, whether it is what you eat or don't eat, so dietary restrictions or DR, how much you eat, which is a caloric restriction, or CR, or when you eat and don't eat, which is time restriction, or TR, so Theodore and R. Virtually all of the dietary schemes you can think of can be distilled into these 3 elements in some combination. Let's look at this figure and or drawing or graph and whatever. So we have DR restricting the elements of the diet, so what you eat. Then you have TR, restrict timing of meals, when you eat, and then we have CR, restrict quantity consumed. The goal is always pull at least 1. Often pull 2 and occasionally pull 3. So always use at least one of those 3. So either you're restricting your timing and or the time where you allow yourself to eat, or you restrict yourself of the elements of your diet, so what you eat or the amount you eat. Often pull 2, and I think it is actually very interesting to see that he says often, not always, used to and or have to, and occasionally, only occasionally, do all of those 3. Of the 3 levers, TR, often though in my opinion misleading, called intermittent fasting, possibly contains the simplest dietary prescription. Limit your eating to a window of X hours. For example, only eat between noon and 8 p.m. each day. That is it. Most people out of the gate are already doing something like a 10-14 TRF schedule, even without a modicum of effort, i.e. not eating for 10 hours, eating within a 14-hour window. From here it is pretty easy to get to 12-12. E.g. only eat between 8 a.m. and 8 p.m. and then 14-10 and soon enough 16-8. Before you know it, you'll be amazed by how easy 18-6 feels or only eating between 1 p.m. and 7 p.m. I began experimenting with TRF in earnest in late 2013, and by the end of 2014 I had spent 6 months doing a 22-2 regimen every single day, which works out to basically 1 meal per day, grazed on over 2 hours. I'll save the details of that for another time, but the metabolic flexibility I experienced was certainly on par with what I had experienced during my longer journey in nutritional ketosis. For example, though I was only eating 1 large meal per day, at dinner I worked up to doing a 6-hour very tough bike ride on nothing but water in the first half of the day. Compare this to the thought, planning and education for the patient and or provider that goes into CR and DR with daily calorie counting and questions around is it paleo, keto, vegan, sugar-free, respectively. One thing is for certain, if you want to be sick, don't do any of these things. Eat as much as you want, so no CR, of anything you want, no DR, and whenever you want, no TR. This is called the standard American diet. The further you can get away from this pattern of eating, the better. As I say in the video, always pull one of the levers, often pull 2, and sometimes pull all 3. Next week we'll take a closer look at one of those levers, time restriction, and the recent reviews on it in the NEJM. Sign up for Peter's expertise in your inbox, blah 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 blah. Can we find a bit more in the fasting category? It would actually be rather interesting to learn more about fasting, including types of fasting, fasting metabolism, health effects, and mechanisms of fasting. Fasting and protein, the impact of fasting on muscle mass. Let's have a look. Since there is a correlation between longevity and muscle mass, as I've also figured out today in the podcast episode featuring Peter Attia and Andrew Huberman. But yeah, there we have the show notes. It apparently is a podcast, I guess. Reads time 2 minutes. Well, that's amazing. The impact of fasting / calorie restriction on muscle mass and the potential trade-offs to consider. How do you think about the trade-offs between calorie restriction, fasting, and muscle building for a person from a longevity perspective? The older you are, the more important it is to emphasize anything that is going to allow you to maintain and build strength and maintain muscle mass. Peter is very reluctant to put an excess fasting routine in place for somebody that is not very heavy. That gets to the second equally important consideration, which is the big part of this body composition. If you're talking about somebody who has got 35% body fat, insulin resistance, I think fasting is a very effective tool, and it's okay that they are going to probably lose a little bit of lean mass because they are probably going to lose more fat mass along the way. If you're talking about somebody who is kind of lanky, Peter would lean towards not fasting so much, and if you're going to fast, do it intermittently. For example, maybe once a quarter you do a short fast for 3 days, but most of the time should be really focused on building. As you get older, I think building becomes more important. The leaner you are, building becomes more important. Importance of getting enough protein in the context of fasting / muscle building. A lot of times people interchange the word fasting with other things. So when you said earlier you went to an excess fasting regimen, what is that? Are you talking 12 hours, 24 hours, 72 hours? How do you think about that? We really don't know what's long and what is short for a fast, but we do know the extremes. For instance, we know 12 hours is not a fast, and we know that 5 days is a fast. Does 1 meal a day constitute fasting? I don't think so. The problem with 1 meal a day for most people, if they're trying to put on muscle mass, it's pretty damn hard to eat 2 grams per kilo of protein in one sitting. OMADs and things like that are generally going to come at the expense of muscle mass, not because muscle protein synthesis can't take place if you're smart about where you target and time exercises, but because I simply think most people are protein deficient when they do it. It becomes a bit of a protein sparing diet. Again, OMAD, which is 1 meal a day, is a great idea if you're overweight and insulin resistant, and not a great idea if you are lean. White plate with spoon and fork, intermittent fasting concept, ketogenic diet, weight loss, which apparently are some tags I would think. But yeah, I think it is enough for today of this unfortunately very ugly website, but at least the information was rather interesting and useful. Gonna see you next time. I at least hope. Bye bye.